Hello, and thank you for listening to Renewables, a podcast by BioStar, which aims to explore the current and future energy landscape in America.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Renewables. We are very, very excited about our guest this week. Big thank you to Mike Nemer, the president and CEO of eRENEWABLE, for being here this week. eRENEWABLE is a really interesting, relatively new renewable energy company and platform that we are proud to be looking at some deals with and proud to know. Mike, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks, David. I appreciate the time today, and as always a pleasure to talk to you. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. You have a super interesting background in the oil and gas business, which I want to get into here in a minute. But the sports fanatic in me would be has to mention that you're a Kansas Jayhawk, an alumni of KU, and I think you also, did you do a master's or some program at University of Houston as well?
Well, I didn't get a master's at U of H. What I did do is I was one of the founding board members of I was on the Dean's Advisory Board and one of the founders of the GEMI master's program, which is a Global Energy Management Institute.
Got it. Okay, great.
So that was in the early 2000s that we started that. So that was my time spent there, was on that board.
Yeah, so I know you had some involvement there, and Mike and I joke that during basketball season, you wear the KU hat, right? And then
I do, yeah.
During football season, you find that U of H hat.
I do, and that's interesting this year too, because they've had 5 opening day games. Yeah. Everyone's been canceled because the other teams had COVID to play.
Oh my gosh! Well, I
hope
hope they
put anything on this year.
Yeah, well, I hope they get to play, and hope that we're coming towards the final end of this thing and the final sort of quarter of this. And we're going to talk about COVID here in a little bit, because I know that's led to sort of a need to renew your new business and shift a little bit. So we'll get to that later. I think it's awesome that you work with your wife in the business. Is that right?
I do, yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
No, she, in her professional career, she spent a lot of years also in the energy space. And that's what made dating so easy in the beginning, is we knew the same people when we were both in refined fuels. And so it's just been a natural progression for us to always be talking about the energy markets in our house. So it was just a natural thing to do. And COVID made it easier because we were all just stuck at home, right? So
sure,
it worked out well.
So is that a double desk there, or do you have separate offices?
Separate offices.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, we have a 3-story patio home. I'm on floor 1, she's on floor 3. So
there you go, a little buffer in between. Good deal. Well, I could not work with my wife because she is a nurse in the pediatric ICU, and I would be fainting, or that would be a real problem for me. But she could probably work with me. But no, that's really cool that you get to spend that time with her from a professional standpoint, and family-oriented guy, and that's all great. So I want to talk to you about your past, your experience in the oil and gas business, because you had a really successful and impressive career, I think 40-year career in the oil and gas business. So tell our listeners, just kind of set the stage for where you were, and then we'll get to how you got to here.
Sure. I had been in energy for 40 years, starting from an independent oil producer to a convenience store operator, where I bought all the fuel on the outside. I was always in the oil and refined fuel side of things. I moved to Houston because I took a job in 1989 trading refined fuels at Enron. And 2 or 3 years into that, I pivoted over into the oil sector. I started a new product where, when we bought crude oil at the lease, I could put an underlying floor with it to guarantee the value of the oil to the producer and to the banks. And so that was new to the market, because oil had just came out of $9 back then when we had the invasion.
Wow.
In Kuwait. else. And so when it got up to 15, it had some appeal to everybody. So I did that for a while, and then I finally switched over into the brokerage space and became a partner at one of the large over-the-counter brokerage desks for wholesale electricity. And that took me into wholesale gas, that took me into the natural gas space. From there, I moved in. That led me right into futures because the Dodd-Frank Act made everybody get their futures license. So I became more of a futures broker than an over-the-counter broker. And then through all that, I got tied into a technology company. I saw what it was doing for natural gas and electricity. And then I get that phone call one day from a developer. And that developer asked me, can you use your auction platform for virtual PPA? And he's asking a guy that has never done one electricity deal in his entire life, okay? So I said, let me research it and find out. So I research it, do my due diligence, and 3-4 months later, I know that I can do the auction. I know that the market needs it. And that was the moment that I said, this is for me. This is what I want to do. And that kind of was the making of eRENEWABLE.
Really interesting. So let's stay on the gas auction for just a minute, because some of our viewers, a lot of our viewers are really tuned into the energy space. Some aren't, though. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen in and watch who may not be kind of as specific in the energy markets. And in Kansas and Missouri and a lot of the Midwest, we don't have deregulated electricity markets. They're technically, most of these states are deregulated gas markets, but there's not a lot of shopping for gas contracts going on in this part of the country. So give us just kind of a 101 on what your gas brokerage or your auction platform really does, and what types of consumers are getting on there and shopping.
Well, as a matter of fact, I actually did a gas auction for an ethanol plant in Kansas once. Okay.
All right.
And so they've got to, of course, go buy their gas to fuel everything. And so they typically buy wholesale gas contracts either in the winter or summer strips. So, the winter is the November through March, and the summer is the April through October. So they're either in those sectors or 1-year strips, from a start date. And so if I remember right, we did both a winter and summer piece, and he placed it with 2 different suppliers. And the reason that happens is when we run an auction, he wants a 1 year, but we don't want to just look at the 1 year. Let's look at both the winter, the summer, and the 1-year winter strip, so we can compare prices between all the different suppliers, because you never know when one supplier has an axe to grind in one particular strip, right?
Sure.
So with that said, in his auction, that exactly happened. One supplier won the winter, and a different supplier won the summer. And when he aggregated the price of the 2 together, it equaled a better price than the guy offering the 1-year strip. And so that's what happened. Okay. And
Interesting.
So with that concept of multiple strips being looked at to come up with a better price, that's the concept I brought to the auction for the renewable products that they weren't really seeing. Because at the moment we're running an auction, I don't care if it's gas, electricity, or renewables, whatever the price is at the end of that auction, that is the price at that moment in time at that location for that time period. So on the auction, I always encourage all my hosts to look at more than one term at a time. Because just like with your ethanol guy in Kansas, you just don't know. There could be that one supplier with an axe or one buyer with an axe, and they come and give you a good price in that one term. So it's kind of the genesis as to how that works. And it's more, in your areas where it is regulated, you're right. So for the smaller home or something, you're not going to do a gas deal there. But for the ethanol plants of the world or the manufacturing companies of the world, we do a lot of natural gas. I did 2 natural gas wholesale deals in one in Wisconsin one in Michigan and one in Ohio this week. And so with a large national firm. So just trying to find the best competitive market they can. So
that's great. I really appreciate that context. And so So you get a call and somebody's asking about a virtual PPA. And for our listeners or followers who are wondering what's that, virtual power purchase agreement, the way that we typically finance solar projects is via a power purchase agreement. So I'll go, let's take a school, for example, and build the solar site on top of the school. And then I sell them the power through a power purchase agreement, and they agree to purchase it at a given rate. So Mike, you were called for a virtual PPA, and I'll let you take that one and sort of explain. Again, a lot of our listeners, I think, are very familiar, but there might be a few who aren't. So walk us through what that virtual PPA is and why that meant that you were going to be starting a new company with a new focus on renewables.
Well, the PPA you're talking about with your microgrid that you built, that's a physical delivery. So that's a physical power being used. The virtual, when you put the word virtual in front of it, that product becomes a financial swap. And what we mean by swap is, let's say you're paying $30 a megawatt on that virtual PPA. So on paper, you own it at $30. At the end of the month, when the developer puts it to market, if he collects $31 for it, he writes you a $1 check because you own it at 30, it's now worth 31. But conversely, if he puts it to market and it's at 29, you write him a check for $1 because you still own it for $30. And so it doesn't fit everybody, but those that know how to use financial products, it does fit quite well. And what it allows is, in these states that we've talked about with the 35 states that are regulated, by having a virtual auction in ERCOT or in PJM or even in California, it allows you to invite participants from the regulated areas that can't get what they want within their own state. They can come and buy a virtual and create it synthetically through the swap. And that's what a virtual is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And we're seeing this a lot, particularly, in a lot of different segments, but seeing a tremendous amount of growth in the commercial and industrial space with respect to virtual PPAs. And as my followers and listeners have heard me talk about in the past, there's a real ESG wave that is everybody seems to be riding right now. And you're seeing these corporations set extremely lofty and inspirational, frankly, renewable energy goals and net zero emissions goals. And so talk to us about how important the VPPA is in order to be able to make those goals a reality.
Well, first, with regards to the financial swap that we're discussing, in my whole 40 years in energy, every market that I've ever seen that's moved from physical to financial, the volumes will increase a minimum of 10 times what they trade financially or physically, they'll start trading financially. So when you talk about the expected growth, I think the growth is going to be huge just because historically we've seen that. Go back and look when 1980, when crude oil started trading physically, and all of a sudden it's on the NYMEX, and then boom, it explodes because it's trading financially. Same thing in 1990 for nat gas. This should not be any different. We're going to see people from all over the world starting to trade these virtual products because it's an easy way to achieve those goals that you're talking about when they have to have so much sustainability. They've got to be at 100. I've talked to somebody the other day, supposed to be at 100% sustainable by 2030. Well, physically, that can be kind of difficult to do. So you have two choices. You're going to do the virtual, or you're going to put on unbundled rec, right? You're going to buy that and be able to claim green. But there are lofty goals a lot of these people are putting in place, and they're not really realizing the city councils for some of these communities may be putting them in place, but they don't realize how cumbersome the mechanism behind the words are to get there and to achieve that. So we can help them by a couple different ways: the virtual, coaching them through that and helping that, educating them with that, and helping them purchase an unbundled rec to get there. And then as soon as they build out your microgrid that you discussed, you then flip out of the unbundled rec to balance your book.
Yeah. So tell our viewers, we've gotten into this a little bit on a past episode, but talk to our viewers about bundled versus unbundled RECs. RECs stand for Renewable Energy Credits. So tell our viewers at least a 10,000 foot level, what is an unbundled REC? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, when you were talking about your PPA that you sold to your customer that you build the microgrid, that involved they bought the energy, the physical energy, and they got the renewable energy credit. They got the REC. So that is a bundled REC. So now, if you strip out the energy and it's only the renewable energy credit, that is an unbundled REC, and you still get to make the same attribute claim that you're sustainable. You just, because it wasn't built, you can't claim additionality, right? Because nothing new was built for the grid. But they have the certificate, they could retire the certificate, and thus they're being green.
Yeah, so for our listeners and viewers, there's a lot of Texas wind is one that comes to mind, where these corporations that have set these really lofty ESG goals, they don't have the physical space to actually build their own microgrids, as you put it, or solar or whatever it may be. They have to get into some sort of virtual PPA, or you're seeing a lot of them go out and buy unbundled RECs from large utility wind installations down in Texas, for example. And those unbundled RECs, Mike, you'll know the pricing better than I will. Those trade at a pretty reasonable price, right? I mean, that's a pretty low cost way for a company to go out and hit an ESG goal.
Yeah. So for example, if you were talking to me 8 months ago in ERCOT, you could buy them for under $1 a megawatt hour, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now it's in the $1.50 to $2 range. We've kind of had a spike in it, so on and so forth. But still, that's some of the cheaper RECs in the entire country. I know plenty of people that have they're in PSEG, and that's a more expensive, or PJM, and that's a more expensive REC. But for them to achieve their sustainability in a more cost-effective way, they're buying the ERCOT REC in place of that REC, so they can still claim it, and it's easier on their balance sheet. So that's the easiest way.
And it's really interesting that it seems that these ESG rules are still sort of being written, and there seems to be less credit given, if you will, not in terms of, I mean, the credits are still, a credit's a credit, right? But it seems like there's sort of a push, perhaps all the way down to at the consumer level, for companies to do more than just go out and buy a bunch of unbundled RECs. So we're actually seeing a group right now that we're working with. It's a group of hospitals. We're working with them at a distance, but they have a desire to do a virtual PPA, to have the bundled RECs, and they're asking that come from PJM, so not PJM, not from ERCOT. So they're specifying, the power needs to at least be generated in this sandbox in order for it to really meet our goal. Talk to me about that. Do you think there's validity to kind of what I'm saying? Do you think that as these, because again, it feels sort of like the Wild West with respect to these rules are sort of being written right now. Are you seeing that?
Well, when we were able to attend conventions, the last two conventions I went to, exactly what you just talked about. Some people want it to be exactly in the location they're at, and others want us to buy the cheapest possible. And it seems like in both conventions, everybody that said it out loud or I talked to, it's about a 50-50 split on everybody's point of view. Mm-hmm. Half the people want the best for the bottom line of the company, and the other half wants the ethical version of buying it from where they're at. Sure. And there is no consensus one way or the other in those two conventions I were at. So just speaking from that point of view and from the customers I talked to, I've got a Muni in California. He's buying the ERCOT RECs to offset because it's the cheapest and that's what the city can afford. So everybody's got their own need, and someday this will probably all shake out. But in the meantime, it is the Wild Wild West. You can buy them where you want.
Yep. Yeah, it's super interesting. So let's shift just a little bit. Talk to me about COVID, and you're launching a new business. with a really, really neat platform. And I've seen sort of a demo that Mike's given to my team, and it's really cool the way that he does this. But talk to me about how COVID has affected your business, and how have you had to renew your model since March as this global pandemic hit?
Well, that's a great question, because we had our last auction late April, right after COVID hit. Relatively successful auction, had a lot of volume, had decent respected price. We didn't know how great the price was till next month when it fell $2 below what our price was. But
Wow.
So our system brought competition, and it makes aggregation extremely simple. And that was part of the premise of why I wanted to do this. We'd help companies aggregate faster by blending, different bids together. So that said, after that took place, I had 2 different sellers and 2 different buyers lined up for auctions. But then in the heart of COVID, everybody's at home, everything went on hold. So here we're sitting here like, what are we supposed to do? So we pivoted into a heavy marketing campaign to develop our customer base, to get name recognition, to be on shows like yours, to have our own podcast. So as we continue to market via our email campaigns, constant contact, LinkedIn, all the normal channels we market, we've got a list. We send out to over 4,000 people that we have names of now. Okay. And we've had tons of different meetings that we've taken on the phone. And from those meetings, I've had to pivot into more than just the auction. And the pivots came to topics such as microgrids are now a common topic. Matter of fact, that's what we're working with your firm on, is a couple of those different installations. Energy master plans are a common topic that we discuss. Unbundled RECs has become extremely important in that conversation. And of late, I've got guys asking, can we use the auction to buy a renewable retail electricity product? And of course they can. So we've had to pivot away from strictly being the large PPA, VPPA auction, and giving the customer flexibility and be able to advise them. And so we put project partners in place for any of that I named that we don't personally do ourselves. We've got project partners in place that do it, that I trust, that we can refer to our customer, and we then take that next phone call with that partner on the phone with us.
Sure.
So that's how it's gone. We started our podcast that you so kindly was a guest of on Monday, which has been phenomenally received. So you did a great job on that.
Yeah,
the Green
thank you.
Insider. So we appreciate that, and glad to be able to be here on yours today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed being on the Green Insider. And for our listeners and viewers, if you're enjoying our podcast, I can promise you that you will enjoy the Green Insider. Mike, tell us real quick, because you have you sort of co-host that with a guy named Fred Davis, who is an inspiration to me because he's got an awesome voice and he's just totally animated. I mean, really a great podcast voice. So tell our listeners and viewers how to find that.
Well, you can, we're on wherever you find your podcast, we're there. We're on Apple, we're on Google, we're on Spotify, we're on all those. But you can actually simply just go to our website, eRenew.net, and we have every episode under our eMedia page. And Fred's a great host. He's a professional at what he does. And I just enjoyed, watching him. I'm the co-host. He's really the host, okay? And each one I'm getting progressively better, because I didn't realize I didn't really listen as well as I should in the beginning. It takes a knack, as you're probably discovering as you host your own. It takes a little bit of a knack to be a host. And so Fred does a great job. He also is from KU, and we actually met on a Les Miles Twitter feed about KU football last year. So he said something.
Awesome.
He said something. I responded to it, and overnight he direct messaged me and wanted to talk about the energy business. And it was that simple. And here we go. The Green Insider was born. Yes.
That's great. A colleague of mine who works in our business, Peter Gohausen, it is actually fairly common for me to say, how'd you meet that guy? Or how'd you meet that girl? Oh, on Twitter. And so I love that. That's great. That's what these social platforms should be doing, is connecting like-minded individuals and business people. That's really, really cool. And, I can tell that you're an entrepreneurial guy. I think it's really, really smart, even though maybe you didn't intend for it to happen this way with the pandemic. Who could have seen that coming? But I think that all these different services that you're putting in place and now being able to offer, whether it's you or through a partner for companies and municipalities, I think that's really, really awesome because, like we said, it's the Wild West and there's a lot of people out there trying to learn, as quickly as they can. How do I meet my ESG goals? How do I be sustainable? And so it seems like you're building out a really, really necessary and frankly needed platform for customers. So tell me, what types of customers are you most commonly working with? I know you and I are working with a couple of different municipalities looking at physical delivery with solar and microgrid projects. What other types of customers are you typically working with?
So right now, the most common conversation is with the municipalities. They
Okay.
need a lot of help. They need a lot of education. And so from those calls, that's what drove us to the podcast and to our blog was education. We saw that so many of them are understaffed, overworked and understaffed. Now you have COVID. Sure. They just are yearning for education. So we hope to bring them education by interviewing professionals like yourself, okay? And so the munis have been an important role in what we've done so far. Sure. We have got some Fortune 50 companies looking at buyer's auction on our platform because it does simplify the process for them. Because, if you've been involved in an RFP could take months. You got to get shortlisted and everything else, right? And we have ours done in 45 minutes, and we do the RFP work for them. So we're a great assistance to that buyer. And so conversely, the seller that's a developer is always looking for an off-taker, right? They're looking for a buyer. So the auctions we've had have been sellers auctions, and we delivered in the first auction 18 buyers, and the next two auctions 17 buyers showed up on both, and we did all the work. The seller didn't have to do anything to invite anybody. We took care of all of that. And so we put out the RFP, and we have question answer periods, and so we help expedite things. So we've got developers on one side that maybe are short in marketing, that they need a little help bringing a buyer or an off-taker. We can help them with that. Conversely, the buyer that wants to have a quicker RFP or wants to be part of an aggregation, we can show them how to do that as we aggregate volumes onto the platform. Whether that's a muni or C&I customer, universities are also one that we've been pretty commonly talking to. So that entire space, there's a niche for that on the platform, a variety of different ways we can structure it, but there's not one customer that is my true target. I would be blind to think it's just one guy or one institutional lane that I have to drive down, right? So we got the developers to sell it, and then we have to have the munis, the C&I, and the universities or states to come back in as a procurement side. We've also had interest, believe it or not, I didn't expect, was the interest in the longer term deals also from the trading world and utilities. They've been interested to be on an auction to be buyers. And so that's been a big benefit for us. Yeah. So that took me back to my wholesale days that in the oil and gas business with the same companies I used to deal with before, just a different division. So that was pretty seamless for myself to be able to bring that to the table.
Sure. Very interesting. BioStar, really quickly to your point on RFPs, I just talked to a school district a couple of weeks ago that told me it costs them between $50,000 and $70,000 to issue an RFP. And they can't stand having to issue RFPs, but they end up having to do it all the time. So it's a really interesting point. And that's a lot of value that you can bring to a buyer from that standpoint. Just the RFP alone is so burdensome oftentimes.
And it's in the majority of states, if they go out instead of going out on their own old-fashioned RFP, if they're going to an auction platform, that satisfies all the state's procurement laws, and they don't have to go through all those gyrations. We can automate the whole thing, and it's done much, much faster and more streamlined for them. And in addition to the streamline, it's transparent because all the participants see the price. Do you want to beat it or not? And it's as simple as that. They just don't know who they're against. And
That's
so
fascinating.
it does streamline everything and make it more efficient for all participants.
Are you offering renewable natural gas auctions? And if not, is that something that you think you'll consider in the future?
Well, nobody's asked me to do one. It'd be very simple for us to do. It's just minor tweaks to be able to make it fit the product that we're trying to do. So that is something we could sure talk about offline if that's something you all have an interest in, because that would not be an issue for us to be able to do that.
Sure. We're really putting a lot of focus into developing renewable natural gas projects, and we absolutely will circle up on that offline. That's probably a whole other podcast. So Mike Nemer, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you'll come back maybe in a few months. Hopefully we'll be on the other side of this pandemic, and I want to stay in touch and make sure our listeners can stay in touch and keep up with all the good work that you're doing. One more time, give us your website so our listeners can go there to find your podcast, The Green Insider. You can also find it on Spotify, Apple Music, Google, but please, one more time, give us your website so our listeners know.
Yeah, we just revamped our website. Please visit it, erenew.net. That's erenew.net. And if you ever want to call us, we have a real simple toll-free number, 866-eRENEW1. Give us a call.
Easy enough. Mike, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your time. I look forward to our next discussion.
Likewise. Have a good weekend. Bye.